Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we are specifically going to talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie in context of Dungeons & Dragons and the Super Mario Brothers movie's massive opening weekend box office and why it's so far surpassed Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves opening weekend box office and some of the problems that Hasbro has, that the OSR allies have, and that the D&D community has. All right. So let me give you the numbers. So first of all, we didn't know this, right? But D&D Honor Among Thieves very logically, very directly picked up some massive enemies, right? Like basically intellectual properties that became enemies to the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves film and the D&D. So the John Wick intellectual property, in my humble opinion, has become an enemy to the D&D intellectual property, and the Super Mario Brothers movie has become an enemy to the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves intellectual property. Now, I don't think this was on purpose for anybody, right? But the reality is, and this is my point, you'll see a million creators coming, can't we just all play what we like and do what we want, and it doesn't matter, it's all fun, and everybody can do whatever they want, and everything's going to work out for everybody. No. The Kumbaya Garden is done. We are on contested ground, right? We live in a world where it is zero sum, baby. There are only so many theaters, right? And when Super Mario Brothers movie came in with a potential multi-billion-dollar franchise, it took premium screens that Dungeons & Dragons legitimately needed, right? And it took literally hundreds, if not over 1,000 theaters that D&D needed, right? And so it's zero sum, right? And if you want to sign up for this nonsense junk that we can all just do what we want and go about our own way, and you do yours and I do mine, blah, 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 you lose. This world has limited resources, right? And this is my point, is Dungeons & Dragons can no longer pretend it's in a Kumbaya garden, right? They are virtually fighting for every dungeon master. They are virtually fighting for every tabletop role-playing game player to make them a D&D player. And when the OSR wins a player, D&D loses a player, right? And there are so many things that any one person can do nowadays that the idea that they're just gonna, that they're gonna play everything they want is ludicrous, right? There is a competition for eyeballs, for earballs. It's there, right? I'm so tired of all these ridiculous Kumbaya garden conversations. It's nonsense. The floating tide, the rising tide floating all boats is no longer true. Okay? All right. So I just wanted to put that into place. All right. Let's look at the numbers, man. Super Mario Brothers made 145 million domestic, right? Opening weekend in America alone. In America alone, it made 145 million, almost 4 times the same opening weekend that Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. So Super Mario Brothers outpaced the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves by a factor of 4, almost, right? It's very close, right? No, I'm sorry, not a factor, by a multiple of 4. 4 times, right? That's huge. That is huge, right? And then it made $230 million global. Just absolutely massive, right? And Dungeons & Dragons made about 70 million global. So Super Mario's global, right, was 3 times larger than Dungeons & Dragons global. So it beat it in the domestic, it beat it in the global. And so let's talk about fault, right? So whose fault is it that Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves did not perform? 90% of that of the fault lies with the OSR partisans who shouted D&D be gone and resurrected 4 decades of terror, right? To make people say, oh yeah, I stayed away from D&D in the 80s, I'll stay away from D&D in the 2000s too. They literally used the same words as the American Evangelical Christians. They said D&D be gone. And the real failure, the real commercial failure of the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves belongs 90% to the OSR partisans who gave a concerted effort to boycott the film and spread their villainy across a lot of people, and I think, and the reality is 90% of the fault lies with the OSR partisans, but 5% fault lies with Hasbro and the D&D community. And now we have to look at that 5%. We have to look at the real cause of that 5%, because it's not all the OSR partisans' fault. 90% of it is theirs, and 5% of it belongs to Hasbro and the D&D community, split evenly. Okay, so why are we in this position? Why did our movie get outpaced by a movie about a plumber, right? Like, why, right? Well, here's the reality. Our fault, the Hasbro fault, and the D&D community is we have made Dungeons & Dragons a product for the intellectual elite. For actually an elite, for an elite group of people who are the most charismatic, confident, and intelligent people in the world. And we've been comfortable with it, and we've been creating this podcast community, right? And we only want the most charismatic, the most confident, and the most intelligent people. And we've done this by making sure that Dungeons & Dragons 5e alone has 8,000, that Dungeons & Dragons current edition, right, has 8,000 pages of content. 8,000 pages of canon content. That pushes people away, right? Like, it tells people this is only for the smartest, this is only for the most intelligent. This is all, and Ben from Questing Beast said it in the fall of 2022. The current expectation of a dungeon master is that you are an epic storyteller. You know the rules backwards and forwards, and you serve as a life coach, right? That is real. And the reason why is, in my humble opinion, Matthew Mercer has fully displayed it, right? And people come to the table and they expect every DM to be Matthew Mercer. And so that is my humble opinion on, and we have crafted Dungeons & Dragons to be only accessible to the most charismatic, confident, intelligent peoples. And we said, hey, if you are not very charismatic, if you are not very confident, and if you are not very intelligent, you can go kick rocks, and we do not want you in our community. And that's on us. That is on us, right? And the reality is we have to look hard at this, right? There is a larger group of people who are more interested in a world that features a plumber, that features two brother plumbers, right, than they are in playing in the Dungeons & Dragons world. We created that problem, right? So not only are there more people who are interested in a world about two brother plumbers, right, and a turtle, and a mean turtle, but that community, not only do they have a larger community interested in that world, right, that the people who are interested have even more goodwill than we have for Dungeons & Dragons. And that's on us too, right? How many of the people who play Dungeons & Dragons do nothing but spew hate about Dungeons & Dragons absolutely constantly? It is Indestructo Boy, Ted from Nerd Immersion, Professor Direct Message, right? Just Ginny D, just absolute constant downing of the thing that literally gave them 100,000K buttons, gave them money, gave them joy, and they it's not that they do a huge amount of content that is done for no other reason than to castigate and mock the thing that they pretend to like. That's on us. We built this, right? It's incredibly frustrating. I wanted to get in those numbers with you. Thanks for being patient and walking through that with me. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's really important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.